Lieutenant Colonel Hunter Ripley Rip Rawlings IV recently retired after 23 years of service to the United States Marine Corps, and that included 10 combat and peacekeeping deployments. He's also the New York Times bestselling co-author of the 2019 military fiction novel, Red Metal. His debut included working with industry heavyweight Mark Graney, where the book received bestseller status from the New York Times, USA Today, and Amazon on its release week. Since Red Metal, he's signed a multiple book deal with Kensington Publishing for a military fiction series titled Assault by Fire. The first book is set to release in the fall of 2020. In addition, Rip is an avid hunter and outdoorsman, a rock drummer, motorcyclist, scuba diver, and licensed small craft sailor. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Colonel Rawlings. Hey, we want to welcome Rip to the show. Colonel Rawlings, how are you?
Doing great, guys. Cheers. Good to see you, Rip.
Cheers, Rip. The drink.
Cheers.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get right into it here. Your entry into the business of publishing was pretty unique, to say the least. Co-writing with one of the top writers, Mark Graney, working with an amazing editor, Tom Colgan. Even with the guidance that they were able to provide you at the beginning, what still surprised you about this whole enterprise that even those guys didn't reveal?
Everything. It's a difficult enterprise. So the Marine Corps prepares you for a lot. So the writing aspect of it, I think I was pretty well ready for, just because, especially having had to do a staff tour, every Marine or soldier, sailor, airman who has to do a Pentagon knows writing is kind of a labor of love. You got to either love what you're doing or leave it. So I think the most surprising stuff working with Mark really was, there was such a rich environment for us to get into. We started to add more and more and more. And before we knew it, we had just 260,000 words, and we were contracted for 200. So I think what is that we had kind of a plethora of ideas. We had overkill, I guess.
Wow. 257,000 words.
I've never written that much.
Well, I think our max was 263. I had some stuff hidden, so I think it was probably about 268 because I had a bunch of other stuff that I was going to pull out later, which we did. So we had a lot of stuff. Mark told me, hey, we're going to be held to the 215, 200 range, but, I'll argue us up a little bit. So, let's keep the stuff that we love.
Nice.
Wow, dude. That's crazy.
So, to my mind, Red Metal is the best military thriller in a generation. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And when Mark was on, he said that when you guys would look back at scenes, it got to the point where you like, did I write that? Did you write that? I don't know. I don't remember how you wrote that.
Yeah, we had our most infamous, I think, was the A-10 afterburner scene, and it should show you.
Do A-10s have afterburners?
A-10s do not have afterburners. No. You know what's funny is I sent some of the A-10 stuff out to a buddy of mine who's at Nellis Air Force Base, and we kind of modeled one of our characters after him in the book, and he saw most of this, and he gave a lot of pointers. I don't think he noticed that, or we added it late, but yeah, Mark and I both took the blame for it.
Falling that sword.
It was me. The guy, and it sounds like something stupid I would. I had at one point, Mark didn't say this, but I'll go ahead and shame myself. But I had a ejector seat in a helicopter for
what?
I was writing it, and there was a Russian helicopter that we're using that has an ejector seat.
Well, that makes sense.
It does. And then I switched over, and I was writing part of the Apache. I don't know. It must have been like 2 a.m. I don't know what. Mark caught it like the next day, though, and he's like, I don't think there's any. And I'm like, did I write that? Oh, shit.
Nice.
So we had a few. Thankfully, we caught all those besides the A-10 afterburners.
Let's hope it doesn't eject straight up.
I was going to say, they don't call it an ejector seat. It's called the guillotine chair.
We experimented with them in the U.S. The blades eject and then get out. And it's on this little skid, this ramp. The Russians have one that goes downwards that shoots the guy out downwards. But who knew?
Wow. How about sideways, right?
Well, and get the guy out of there, right? Who cares about the Marines in back? Let's worry about the
I was going to say.
We'll make more.
They make more.
The guys in front cost millions.
Yeah.
So when he was saying that though about you guys kind of being confused about that, I'm curious, how did you, when you started writing the book, how did you divvy up the responsibilities when it came to research and writing, or was it a very fluid process?
It was pretty fluid. What I really enjoyed about it was that we mixed and matched. And Mark was pretty keen on that. He would say, I'm working on this character for a little while because I kind of see a trajectory. How are you feeling about this guy or this gal? And I'd say, okay, yeah, man. And so we didn't write it. We had the full outline. We had a 96 chapter outline, and we stayed true to it. But I think after we got to about chapter 22, we started bouncing around a little bit. And that's where the mix and match came, is that, hey, I see this character and here's what they're doing in this scene. Let me take a whack at it. And so I would write 4, 5, 6 chapters, of this character. And so we switched around.
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, there's no discernible difference between.
Yeah, you don't see the missing fluidity of it all. Yeah.
Good to hear. Yeah, Mark was big on that. He wanted to make sure there's continuity between the characters. He wanted seamlessness between, if I'd written one character and then he picked them up. So we did have a fair amount of kind of internet conferences where we'd say, okay, hey, you had so-and-so doing this. Here's how I see them encountering the next obstacle. So how does that work with the motivations and stuff that you wrote? So I don't know, it's very collaborative. I mean, this being my first collaborative enterprise, I thought it was fantastic. I mean, Mark is truly an inspiration to work with also. I mean, the guy, I don't want to butter him up. He gets really upset when I start saying stuff about him, but I've got nothing but good stuff to say about the guy. But he would say, like, if there was something he didn't like, he didn't come out and say, "Rip, you piece of shit. Are you this is a fucking ejector?" Nothing like that. He would say, I'm not feeling chapter 46. And I'd say, okay, what do you think? He said, well, I think we need a little more action. And I'd say, okay. So I'd work on it for, 2 days, and then I'd shoot it over and say, what do you think? And he'd go, yeah, that's it. You nailed it. And I'm like, holy shit, we're writing. This
Wow,
is great.
nice.
Yeah, so you couldn't pick a better mentor. I love telling the story where when he would mentor me on some stuff, he would say, hey, look, and I knew, he felt like maybe this chapter wasn't working, or maybe a character had gone on a trajectory he wasn't really too excited about. And he'd say, listen, I don't want to sound like Yoda here, but, what I want you to do is look at it from what is the character driven towards, what's their ultimate goal? And I'd be like, hey, that's great, because if you're Yoda, that means I'm Luke. So let's make this work, buddy. It was not only complimentary, but it was, we thrived off of each other. I mean, in a good way, but also in the sense that we would write too much, and then we'd go, this is really awesome, but we've blown the lid off. This is too many pages.
Wrote too much in a 200,000 plus word book.
We had some guys in one of our interviews who said, did you save all the stuff you cut? And Mark and I kind of looked at each other like, well, I mean, the final edited version is really what we're proud of. They said, but save the other stuff and put it in an unlimited edition. Like,
Unlimited edition.
I don't even want to read that, but
Who's going to bind that thing?
Wouldn't want to read that.
A 4-part volume.
Yeah.
Yes, someone asked us if we wanted to make 2 books out of it. I don't think it was Colgan. I don't think Tom Colgan was interested in that, but I don't know. A couple people asked us if we wanted to divide up into 2 books, and we were like, no, this is one book.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I know Sean had asked a little bit about it, and we talked to Mark, obviously, and he kind of told us how the process worked for you guys, how his piece of it worked. You've expressed to us how basically how enjoyable it was to work with Mark. So what was was there one piece of advice that he gave you during that co-writing process that really, stood out, or if not just one, what did you learn from him in doing that exercise?
I mean, a lot. I don't think if I sat down with Mark and kind of went over like the eaches, he'd be surprised. I was like a sponge. I mean, anytime there was a chance to switch on and listen, I was listening. I don't know, is there any one thing? I would say kind of in the top tier were things like, okay, focus on what the character is driven towards. Think of your audience and what they can absorb in kind of one blast. So he would look at something and say, the scene is violent, which I like. There's a lot of great action, but it explodes off the page, but it's doing all 3 of those things at once. Let's meet it out a little bit more and make sure that your average reader can figure out what's going on. I don't mean to say he wanted us to dumb it down either. It was just he needed clarity. I mean, I guess that's the best way to put it, is that, if you've got too many explosions and too many things, kind of too many bullets coming at you, eventually people kind of give up. And we also had that balance with the technology piece, where we would sit down and say, okay, how much do we get into trajectories and classifications of armaments and that kind of thing? And, Tom Colgan really spiced this up and said, put a fair amount. This is a military techno thriller. People want to know that what the weapons are. They'll trust you, that you're doing the right thing. But for the most part, don't go overboard. So Mark was also our litmus test for that. He would say, we've had like 6 military acronyms in a row. Let's back this off.
Yeah.
Can you really have too many explosions in a thriller?
Not.
I mean, I think so. There were pieces where we had too much drama, and there were pieces where we had too much action. And so Mark was right to say, we need to intersperse these. I mean, you need to give people a breather, but you also need to make sure that they're not falling asleep. They want to enjoy an action thriller. That's why they picked it up. Mark told me, there's one piece of advice that I remember very clearly among all of them, and Mark said, "Don't read any of the reviews." And I've read he told me, he said, I don't read any of the reviews. I'm going to tell you this right now. Don't read one of the reviews, but I'm also going to tell you, on your first book, you can't stop it. You will. And he's right. I've read all the reviews, and I read them religiously. One guy wrote on there, actually, there are a couple funny reviews. One said, this was just war porn. It was just one nonsense explosion. It was shooting guns the whole time. I'm like, there's a fucking tank on the cover, dude. Look at the book. War novel. We had some stuff about our female officers and the female sub-captain stuff too, that at least a few of my female submarine acquaintances were none too thrilled about.
Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question, because Red Metal comes out to, it came out to rave reviews and ended up rightfully so on the New York Times and Amazon bestsellers list. But like you just said, I mean, readers are fickle. It's very subjective.
I'm learning, yeah.
And somebody, and I just find it's funny that some even take the time out of their day. Everyone's busy doing crazy stuff to send you or Mark or the internet negative notes or leave negative feedback.
We don't get many. I mean, obviously you do tend to take a look at the negative ones. The positive ones, there were some very nice complimentary ones, but
right.
Mark has gotten some that he shares with me on his own novels and on Red Metal that are off the wall. I mean, he'll get ones that say, page 26, it's pretty clear this author does not know that it takes 3 eggs and 2 sides of bacon. What? Did you mix me up with a cookbook? Because you read the wrong review. He had one that was for like a vacuum. It was like, this thing, is clearly doesn't have the power it needs or whatever. And he's kind of at least a little bit thinking, gosh, this guy's speaking metaphorically. He's clearly a very he's very wise. And then he gets down to the bottom. It's like, this product, the Shrek home vacuum cleaner system should not be sold on Amazon. It's like, come on, dude, you gave me 1 star, man. You don't know what you're reviewing. So
so Marcus told us in the past, people send crazy notes to him, and he responds occasionally to them. Yeah. Have you had the chance to respond to any of them?
I don't know. I take Mark's advice, which is don't respond.
Which he doesn't follow.
He should take his own advice.
Yeah. As the Luke Skywalker in this relationship, I got to listen to what he says. Yeah. He says don't, but then he'll say, "Read this. What is wrong with this guy?" I'm sending him. They're like, "You always tell me not to do that, man." He clearly is very. He gets a tremendous amount of fan mail, and not only that, he gets some very inspirational stuff from guys, downrange who are reading his books and are just thrilled to break. I mean, that's awesome. A lot of us military guys got in because guys like Mark were putting out these unbelievable hits that, you're sitting in the middle of Iraq. It's 126 degrees. You've got, half a canteen of water and life is not that great. And then you crack a granny and you're like, this is, I'm in another land now. I'm thinking about something else. I'm not worried about getting my head shot off. Yeah. So for every negative one, I'm sure, Mark gets about 300 good ones. And I mean, I'm amping it up a little bit. I don't know that he's never clicked off safe on anybody, but I know there's been a few that are just so he's got
he
a
told
lot.
us about one.
Yeah, we heard a couple.
It's funny. I actually think a comment on your book made me respond on Amazon. And it had to, I think it had to do with the female sub captain. It was,
Yeah.
the point was, there's not one now. So it's not that far off. I mean,
It's coming.
you only have to look at, politics and military over the last 10 years to know that that's just a matter of time. It's not
Well, it's more than a matter.
far-fetched.
We went down and visited the U.S. John Warner, which is the sub that we have in the book, crewed or captained by Captain Del Vecchio. And when I was on board, the weapons officer took me around. A fantastic guy. I mean, if you want to meet some young Americans who are defending us at the tip of the spear right now, just go on board any submarine. These guys and gals have some amazing dedication. I don't know. I mean, as a infantry and reconnaissance guy, I'm not sure how to enjoy being under the waves for 6 months at a time.
Months, yeah.
I like sun. I wouldn't want to be underwater, but these guys are fantastic. I also had a realization when I was on board his ship, on his boat, that they're the ones who had just fired all those missiles into Libya, and Syria. And so I was kind of had this realization while I'm talking to him, like, holy shit, you guys are the ones that fired the missiles into Syria. Yeah. So I said, hey, look, between us chickens here, how do you think folks would feel about a female captain? Because we've got a female skipper for the submarine. He said, well, I'll be honest with you, sir. We've got 2 females on board right now. And the detailer, which is the person in the Navy who sends each of the Navy officers to where they're supposed to go, their next duty assignment. He said the detailer sent us not the top 1%, but about the top 0.5%. And so these ladies, these female sailors, officers, outclass the males so much that the guys have to bring up their game just to kind of compete. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I said, how long until we see a female skipper? He said 3-4 years.
That's it.
Hey, so we were talking about reviews, and I know you said that you've read all yours. I just had a book out this summer, so yeah, I read all mine too, and I wasn't supposed to.
There you go. It's the first author thing. You got to do it.
Yeah, it's So the question I have is, do the reviews that you receive from veterans have a clear delineation from civilians who have not served? Do you see a difference in those two, John?
I do. The ones I get from vets, I typically get by email from, counterparts or friends of counterparts who gave someone my email and said, hey, I know the author, right? You might want to write to this guy. I know one of the authors. And those are generally pretty complimentary. You do get occasionally someone says, hey, I served, 30 years in submarines, and, we've got widgets now instead of whatsits, but I think we're pretty well spot on. But it does bring some gravity. I've had some that are really nice that said, hey, I'm downrange, and this was, a great distraction. And I really appreciated that you got kind of the ground side right, and that the infantry side was not just exciting and entertaining, but also had, kind of a classy side to it. It wasn't just some guy hacking and slashing at people.
Yeah.
Cool. So speaking of staying with Red Metal, clearly, you've got some of the greatest compliments there are of being compared to Tom Clancy, and in particular, Red Storm Rising, a book that's over my shoulder, which a lot of times comes on the list of some of really Clancy's favorite or best work that he did. So to get that compliment probably is pretty, pretty exciting. Was Tom really a large influence for you as you started writing, or was he kind of your go-to influence for your writing career?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, he was, not only did I read Tom Clancy at a really early age, I think I started reading him, I guess at 82. Oh, sorry, we got the driveway alarm.
We'll bring on our Star Wars episode.
That's Indiana Jones. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I.
There we go. Now you can answer.
I not only did I read it at a really young age, I think it had some influence in me going into service. Is that it was such a big deal back in the 80s that I think all of us read it and kind of saw. Not only was this a viable career, but America is doing good things downrange. Stuff that's good for the world. So that's
absolutely. He was a big influence, I know, on just the four of us. So, and most authors now that write anything in the thriller genre, we'll probably go back to him.
Oh,
Who
absolutely.
else besides Clancy was a really significant influence on you from a writing perspective?
Let's see. I read very widely. So I read spy thriller genre. I read John le Carré. I read a lot of classics. So I read Horatio Hornblower when I was a kid, which is a story about a ship's captain who kind of goes through the ranks in the British Navy back in the 1800s. And I mean, hold on, I'll show you my books. This is just my inside bookshelf, but my bookshelf is a lot of.
Boy.
No, there's my uniform.
There you go.
Yeah, boy.
Wow.
So this is the small bookshelf. The big bookshelf is in the other part of our house.
Wow.
So I don't know. I read too much. Probably.
No, you don't. If you're going to be a successful writer, you have to be even more voracious reader, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. I think not only do you learn techniques and tactics from folks, but it's like entering another world. I mean, everybody enjoys, getting into a good book. All of us probably remember. I mean, we're all talking about reading and writing, so all of us remember the first few books that you get into where something really piqued your interest, and you realize this is amazing. I'm in a different world for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while we're on the subject of writing, not necessarily any book or specific influence, but you have a degree in American Lit and German Lit, or English Lit and German Lit?
English Lit, yep.
English Lit. Was this kind of always your plan for your post-military career, or did you happen to?
No, it wasn't. I think my parents are glad I
Worked out.
my mother kind of religiously read all of the MIA and KIA reports when I was employed. So for her, it's real. She's a writer. She's a writer and a radio personality, and so for her, I think that was a thrill. My dad is a classicist, so he taught Greek and Latin, and so he's probably partly to blame. Is that we grew up, reading Herodotus, and we read a fair amount of Euripides. We read about the Trojan War a lot. I was always fascinated because my dad, in kind of a sonorous tone, would read about the Trojan War next to the fireplace when I was a little boy. And I remember it's a very violent book. If you read it today, you'd be surprised at how action-packed it is, because they talk about the guy thrusting a spear up through the guy's throat, and his eyeball comes out the top of the spear. It's like, holy shit, this was written thousands of years ago, and it's extremely entertaining. And not only that, but it's very gory and very graphic. It's one of the first, kind of graphic war novels, even predates Clancy.
Yeah, no kidding.
So Rip, being a writer today means not just writing books. You have to become a brand. Like you yourself are the brand, and you have to interact on social media and put yourself out there. I know that was difficult for myself to do that once I left the Secret Service, and my agent said, hey, listen, you got to get out there. You got to make a website. You got to get on social media. And as someone who spent his entire life in the military, how uncomfortable was that transition for you? And is it still?
So it was really uncomfortable. I have a funny story. So I was for whatever was going on, I can't remember, but I got selected to be base command duty officer. So they picked lieutenant colonels to run the base for 48 hours. And, you basically are the general's envoy for anything that happens on the base. And you get a driver who drives you around the whole time. And I had this really awesome sergeant. His name was Sergeant Taylor. And he said, hey, sir, some of the guys were talking. They said that you're retiring. And I said, yep, that's right. He said, well, why are you leaving? I said, 23 years, 10 deployments, back surgery, and I kind of want to spend some time with my kids and, try something else. He said, well, sir, you're going to have to get on social media. I said, yeah, I know. Figure that out. He said, sir, you and I are together for 48 hours. I'm going to teach you how to use Twitter. Like, Sergeant Taylor, no one can teach me how to use Twitter. I don't know what the hell it does. 48 hours later, I mean, literally, we're driving around, and he'd be like, all right, sir, now press the button that says tweet. I'm like, okay. What do I do now? He's like, now it's trying to take a picture of you. I'm like, well, the fuck, I don't want it to take a picture. You got to put a picture. I'm like, bless. So I did all this stuff. So the next day, I'm turning my weapon into the armory. I'm putting my weapon through there, and my phone makes this noise that I've never heard before. It's like, woo, woo. So I pick up my phone, and there's a tweet, and it says, it's a message from Sergeant Taylor. It says, sir, you have a friend on Twitter. I'm like, oh, God bless you, man. You took care of me. I think everything on my social media I owe to my Marines. The Marines taught me how to use Facebook. I had some really plucky captains when I was a battalion commander, and they taught me how to use Facebook the right way. They're like, hey, sir, you know, if there's pictures of you shotgunning gin, so don't do that. If there's pictures of you doing something stupid, the general will see. But pictures of you, you know, kind of doing regular stuff is what the Marines want to see. So I don't know. I listened to my captains for better or for worse. Kind of figured it out from there.
Probably a smart move.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Post the pictures of you saving babies from a burning building. Those you can post.
Well, it's funny
They'll sell books.
my sergeant major was very good at Facebook, so he taught me a lot also. But he would friend kind of surreptitiously a bunch of the lance corporals and privates, and then he would catch them doing stuff. So he'd be like, go get first sergeant so and so from down in company A, because I want to see why Lance Corporal so and so thinks it's good to go to. You know, they'd post. I mean, you lovable private Lance Corporal. One of them would tweet or Facebook at like 3 a.m. Still in Vegas. Hope I make it back to muster on time.
Dumbass.
Like, oh, okay. You just told the world that.
Why the hell do you need to post that?
Yeah.
It's a different generation, man.
It's a generation.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't do that, but apparently they do. So.
Hey, so when I in my lightning brief moment in the Marine Corps, I'd heard some stories from guys about, their travels overseas and certain countries and certain militaries in other countries had opinions of U.S. Marines. So in your experience, what partner country or countries did you find that had the highest regard for the Marine Corps itself?
So Korea and Thailand have their own Marine Corps.
Right.
They're both very good Marine Corps. The Koreans, when I got in the service, were really rough with their guys. To put it lightly, they had hazing and they had a lot of other stuff that we don't stand by. But I didn't know this until we got over there. But they had a rumor among their enlisted guys that in order to become a U.S. Marine, you had to kill your firstborn child.
My goodness.
I think that was all BS, but then we got over there and their NCOs were telling them that, like, oh no, to be a Marine, you got to kill your first kid. That's how you get in. And so and I think it kept their own shtick alive more than it did a lot of good for us, because it just made that their Marines didn't want to hang out with us at all.
I was going to say, you didn't get invited to much.
Yeah, I think it's more for them to kind of keep their guys in line. But I don't know, the Thai military is fantastic. I've trained alongside so many militaries. I mean, I was a military advisor in Saudi Arabia for a year when the towers got hit. And so imagine being over there when we went on high alert. So we had all sorts of interesting stuff happen while we were there, all of which is still classified, but was very interesting. Take my word for it. But what I did learn was, the Saudi forces were fantastic. We were training basically their special forces. It was the same guys that drive this thing, which is the LAV-25 over in Saudi Arabia. So we were teaching them how to be basically Marine light armor reconnaissance guys, and they took to it. They were really good at it.
Nice.
So I've got a tremendous amount of respect for the guys who work with downrange.
So Rip, out of the gate, you're a New York Times bestseller. You have a multiple book deal with Kensington. Coming from military to then writing books, in your wildest dreams, did you expect that early success? And how does it get better from that? Where do you go after you're starting on that plateau?
All downhill from here. It's funny because I was doing a book reconnaissance tour into West Virginia, and I went to this really neat kind of bar place up in Davis, West Virginia. And there was a very neat proprietress, and she's a classy lady from Philadelphia who kind of moved out in order to open up this restaurant, bar, hotel, and it was kind of everything. And she walked over to me while I was typing, and she asked me what I did. I told her I'm a budding author, and she said, "What are you writing?" And I told her, and she kind of was interested. She came back about 15 minutes later and she said, "Your fire has gone out." And I thought, oh my God, she sees right through me. The candle on the table. I'm like, lady, you can't say that to a new writer. My whole world went down. Very smart lady, so I took that very personally.
That's fine.
Yeah, so it's all downhill from there. I think what I thought of it in my wildest dreams, I'm not sure that I would have thought that I was going to go become a Marine Corps lieutenant colonel in my wildest dreams. That was, I don't know. I had a really great young sergeant once who was a retread from the Army, and he had a shock of red hair, and I won't name his name, but he was a wonderful kid. He had a deep, deep Southern accent, and we pulled into Kuwait after a very difficult deployment. I mean, bloody on all sides. And we go into this place. They've got all these great big giant fobs, and we go into this spot where they've got great food and soft serve ice cream. I mean, guys at the rear always have it good. And he said, "You know what, sir? From now on, everything is the gravy train with biscuit wheels." I don't really know what that means, but I love it. I'm with you, but we made it. We're not dead. No one put a round through our throat, and so everything after here is just gravy. So I guess that's kind of how I feel about it. Is that Mark was really fun that he couldn't have written this book without me, which I'm obviously privileged to have him say that or hear him say that, and I feel the same way, which is there's no way I could have written Red Metal without him. So I don't know. The next book is hard. I'm working very hard on it. I've got a system where I kind of clock in every morning to make sure that I'm getting enough hours. I don't want to, I'd be up on the roof, blowing leaves off the roof if I didn't have something to do. I mean, there's always something around the house, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Along those lines, actually, you mentioned, I think when you were on the train or something, you wrote 3,000 words in a few hours. Tell me that's not average.
So on average, when I'm sitting here, because you're in my man cave right now, when I'm sitting in my man cave, I'm about 1,500 to 2,000 words in about a 4-hour stretch, which is very slow for me. I can write fast. On a train, I can write 700,000 words an hour, but it's only on trains. I don't know what the deal is, but I would take the train. In fact, I wrote big swaths of Red Metal. I would, when I was in command out in California, I would take the train from down in LA, just outside San Clemente, which is where the base is, the Marine Corps base is Camp Pendleton, up to Santa Barbara. And that's about a 4.5-hour train trip. I'd have lunch for 2 hours, and then I'd get back on the train, and I'd go back, and I would have about 8,000 to 10,000 words written. So I can.
Lord.
Now that doesn't mean that's
Still
a lot of editing after that, but that's kind of getting out the basics of what I want. And then I don't know, editing, as all of you guys know, takes the most time.
Yeah, for sure.
when I read that, I thought that's why trains are such a big damn deal in Red Metal, is because he loves this
Trains. Yeah, we got a train thing. We talked to the A-10 guys, and we were getting drunk in there. They have this rite of passage just to get down to hang out with them. They've got this place called the Hog Trough, which has got a 30-millimeter Gao gun barrel that hangs from the roof, and there's a bottle of Jim Beam in the top of it. It's got a little spit on the bottom. And just to get admittance into the room, you have to take a shot through this gun barrel. So we'd have a couple shots, and we're talking about the book and writing down copious notes. And we'd already written most of the train sequence, but the one where it gets strafed by the A-10. But we said, if you could attack anything with an A-10, absolutely anything, what would it be? We kind of thought maybe tanks, maybe an aircraft carrier, who knows, something big, a capital target. And they all looked at each other and said, a train. And they pointed to the wall, and there was a painting of 2 Corsairs from World War II strafing a train. If I'm getting the aircraft right, I probably knobbed that one up, but I'm a ground pounder, so you got to forgive me on the
bit wings.
Yeah, something with wings on it.
Yeah, I think my grandpa was lighting them up with his P-38 back in World War II.
Yeah, well, so they said that if they could kill anything, it would be a train. And so we're like, holy shit, we're spot on. This is awesome.
Nice.
That's cool.
So, did the lightning bulb go off of, that's why Tom Colgan keeps sending me train tickets and, hey, get on a train. Go on a train.
Dude, it seems almost unhuman, though. 10,000 words.
I know.
Well, it's like I said, I'm prolific on trains. I actually have one of my former compadres, another lieutenant colonel, who's also an author, figured it out. And he's like, hey, when you were a battalion commander, what did you worry about before you got on a C-130? I said, everything, you get your sergeant major would come, hey, sir, Corporal Jones is missing. Like, what? Corporal Jones did not make it. You're like, okay. And then 5 minutes later, hey, sir, you got a minute? Yeah, Captain so-and-so, what's the deal? But we're missing 2 rifles and a machine gun. Like, okay, go ahead, find them and get back to me. And, hey, sir, did you hear the news? No. Sir, the 6th truck didn't make it, and all the luggage was on that truck. But, all right, okay, got it. And then you get on the plane, and it was bliss, because if you lost a kid, you're not going to lose him in the air. Whoever's on board is with you from then on. No one's losing a rifle. Last time I checked, on board aircraft. I mean, if you allow us, Marines will lose anything anywhere. we would definitely not lose while we're in the belly of a C-130. So I think it's just that ease of, once I'm in motion, my brain is totally at ease, and I can write. But I don't know, I cheated a little bit also. I was in the Pentagon for my sins after Command and Staff College. They sent me to a place called SAW, which is the School of Advanced Warfighting. And you kind of take, I don't know, big nerds, guys with thick glasses, and you send them to the school and say, hey, you're now a planner. We want you to plan strategic shit. So for whatever god-awful reason, they sent me, and that's a lot of writing. So I think I regurgitated those talents that I'd learned back in college. And, when you work for a general, you got to write a lot. It has to be very, you have to write pretty well. And you timeline every time. You're always on a deadline. And the cops care less if your kid's thrown up and is sick and your car has got problems. He doesn't give a shit. He needs his briefings before he goes across the water to brief Congress. So you learn to type pretty fast.
I want to shift gears a little bit. Military wives, military husbands are a special breed of people. With the deployments and the constant moving in a lot of cases, it can be a challenge, but you guys have obviously navigated that through your career really well. So what I'm curious about is, how has your family adjusted to this new phase? And, it's kind of an abnormal life too. It's just a different kind of abnormal life.
Yeah.
You're around too much.
Leave, Rip, leave.
So, I think it was the best decision I've made in a long time, because those 10 deployments, I don't know, we've been at war for a long time.
Yeah.
And it gets harder and harder. I mean, you tend to think that it's easier and easier, but your first deployment, your parents write you cards and letters, you get care packages full of chips and all sorts of crap. By deployment number 3, your dad sends you 2 cards and a letter. And by deployment number 6, your dad forgets, you on deployment? Welcome home, I guess. And then by the time you hit like deployment 7 and 8, it's not all about the homestead. It's more kind of about the fact that it's just inevitable. You're going. And I think it's part of the product of being at war, is that all the guys were like that. Everyone deployed multiple times. I'm not the only guy who did that. And you get really worn out and you miss your family. So I think this was the biggest break, was I worked for a lot of guys that were like me in 10 years. And they're all God-sent, wonderful human beings who are defending the edge of the empire as 1 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars, etc. But in a lot of cases, they have no life. Their family is not there. Many of them have been through multiple divorces. And I said, forget it. I'm married to the right woman. I've got wonderful children, and I want to spend a little time back at home.
Yeah, well deserved.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people ask, do you miss it? I wish you could go back. And it's like, after 23 years, no, I did everything I wanted to do as a captain. And now, then they promoted me to major, and then maybe a lieutenant colonel. And it's like, hey, I just kept doing stuff. So yeah, it feels good to retire.
I bet.
So Rip, you spent a majority of your adult life as a Marine in the U.S. Marine Corps, and only recently retired. So let me ask you, how much do you hate civilian life?
Civilians.
It's funny because my wife says I tolerate civilians. And, is that I'll get really frustrated, and my wife has a code word she uses with me, and she'll be like, burnt popcorn, because she can see I'm getting really frustrated. After a deployment, I burned some popcorn really badly, and I don't know, you know how it is when you microwave popcorn, there's smoke coming. But I think I went over the moon. I'm like, son, it's popcorn. Her call sign or code sign now is, when I get rowdy, we'll be driving and I'll be honking at someone. I'm like, this guy's skull. And she'll say, yes.
No.
Burnt popcorn.
The safety word for the public.
I still have civilians just don't know. I don't know. It's tough adjusting just because, well, partly you got to figure out what you're going to wear every day. I mean, that's the worst.
Dress yourself.
All my buddies are like, dude, do you have anything besides like camouflage utility shirts and stuff like?
No. It's all ever own.
So yeah, just changing clothes is driving me nuts. But
So you also now you have a new series coming out, Assault by Fire, right?
Assault by Fire. Yep.
Can you give us and the audience a little bit of a glimpse of what that series all entails?
Yeah.
You bet. So the way that my publisher wants me to kind of present it is it's a mix between the Dirty Dozen and Red Dawn, and
that's perfect.
that works. But I've said it so many times, I've kind of leveled off into a different stratosphere as far as that's concerned. But that's a pretty good way to capture it. It's literally the Russians. I mean, it kind of comes from the same premise, or similar premise as a lot of war novels today, which is everybody is watching the United States, and they watch our blunders, they watch our successes, and they take notes, and they say, well, if we're going to fight these guys, what do we need to do to overcome the giant American hurdle? And, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all of them look at us and watch what we do and make decisions on what would I have to do to defeat America in the short, medium, and long term. So they are not sitting idly. So this book kind of posits the same thing. Russia says, what do we need to do to deal with the biggest threat that we have to deal with? I mean, every day, America keeps us back. America prevents us from being the nation that we're supposed to be. What do we need to do? And one guy comes up with a theory that's kind of based on the actual Soviet Cold War plans, which is America typically every 20 years gets involved in a war overseas. And when they do, the majority of their active duty forces are shipped overseas. And you're left with reserves, you're left with National Guard, and nothing against our Reserve and National Guard brothers, but they were never intended to kind of safeguard the empire, our little castle here called America, if someone invaded. And so Russia takes a look at it and says, well, there's a couple other things that would need to happen. And here's what they are: 1, 2, 3. They come up with 3 items, and they find a way to make them happen. They find a way, after America gets involved in another adventure overseas, they find a way to make the other 2 items happen. And once it does, the guy, the colonel who's kind of the center of the Russian side of the story, is as surprised as everybody else. But the Russian president says, go, let's do it.
Oh, yeah.
Just start, knock them out with one blow. Let's do it.
Cool, but scary at the same time.
Well, hopefully. I mean, I was talking to some of these guys up in West Virginia, and there's a chief of police in a city called Parsons, Virginia, West Virginia, and he's a former Marine. So he was driving me around. We were kind of on the beat. He'd show me the whole city, and it was Marine to Marine just talking about it. And he asked me the same thing: what's the book about? I gave him kind of the 5-minute shtick I just gave you guys. And he's like, that's awesome. He's like, I would be up in the hills kicking Russians' ass. I'm like, well, there you go. Look.
Little Red Dawn action.
Yeah. I think, when I was a kid, in fact, I wrote my own introduction in the book. I wrote just kind of a preamble, a couple pages about how all of us, you guys included, grew up on Red Dawn, grew up on, books like Red Storm Rising, grew up on books or movies. Do you remember The Day After? The TV
oh yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Holy shit!
Traumatic as hell.
What was funny about it is that in our high school, it didn't matter who you were. If you were a jock, if you were a nerd, it didn't matter who you were. If you were a book guy, if you were whatever, that resonated with everybody. So all of us would talk. Okay, what are you gonna do? Well, I play baseball, so I'm gonna freaking get a baseball bat. What do you do? Well, and so it was like a bonding factor. It was. There's an outside adversary. It's called the Russians, and they could be over here at any minute.
All right. Well, you've survived the regular stuff, but let's see what Rip is made of when we go to the lightning round.
Right.
Famous lightning round requires very little thought.
For myself, another one, or
yeah, you might want to take
absolutely.
a stiff drink here because
double shot time, Rip. Double shot.
That.
Oh, we're gonna refill.
Always bringing it. Oh.
Look at that.
Look at
coming
that.
out of the
Bring
box.
big gun.
What is it?
This guy doesn't screw around.
Oh, what does he have? I just have Tito's.
Nice.
little
Beautiful.
16-year.
My brother's
it's
gonna
funny.
cry.
I've got a Japanese whiskey that my buddies drink, they don't. I guess they're getting to be snobby. But have you had Japanese Scotch and whiskey?
Sean is famous
might
because
wanna
of
talk to
Japanese
that
whiskey.
about that.
Actually,
Holy cow! It's fantastic.
Yeah. And the
the
results
whole
are great
bottle
too.
is really good. Ask Sean.
Sean, how
know,
good
it's
is
free-
Japanese
it's free.
whiskey?
I think my buddies would just drink it, but now they come over. Can I have some of the Japanese stuff? I'm like, dude, we drink like Michelob Light at your house. Screw you, man.
Hibiki 12 year.
I got my Marine mug, so
Nice.
Beauty.
There
Okay.
you go.
Well, looks like you've jocked up for this round here. All right. So I'm going to start this off. Did you, in fact, ever actually find a cigarette butt scouring the ground outside the squad bay at 4 a.m. during OCS?
all the time. I don't know who the damn smokers were.
We would always find one. We always found one at 4 a.m.
Who
I'm
the hell
thinking,
is smoking? No,
I'm
none
like-
of us smoked in OCS, but you know.
nah, I say either, but I'm sure they found some in their bar that night before.
I think
All right.
they like them out there just for us to pick up.
I'm sure they did, because if you didn't find it,
They could come out and go, "Are you fucking kidding me?
you're kidding me. The entire platoon can't find us. Get dressed in the ground. Sounds familiar. All right. What single historical military figure would you want in your foxhole?
Jeez, there's so many to pick from.
All right.
Can I pick like Leonidas or something? I mean,
Sure.
Absolutely, right?
Anyone.
Cool.
Can I pick like Ajax? Can I pick historical, but mythological?
Absolutely.
No
Or I'm
myth.
taking Ajax. Ajax was, I'm convinced. I mean, they were. All the guys that invaded Troy were Marines, right? Because they sailed boats. Got off.
Absolutely.
You and Ajax do not fit in a foxhole, though.
How big is that foxhole?
carry my machine gun anytime.
All right. So you're qualified on just about everything God's ever created for the Marine Corps in terms of firearms. What is your favorite single weapon to shoot?
Still the LAV 25 millimeter Hughes helicopter M242 Bushmaster chain gun.
Oh, man. You could do some damage with that
That-
bad boy.
When that thing fires, it's got 3 selector switches. Single fire, 200 rounds a minute, 300 rounds a minute. And when you put that thing on 300, boom, 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 boom. You're
That
taking
and a train.
Yeah.
Take that to a train.
Oh, man.
Right.
Oof. I'm trying to calculate in my head how much money that would be per minute.
something.
300.
Yeah, worried about that part. It's just we just spend taxpayers' money.
We don't talk about that.
Taxpayers.
We don't.
All
You realize that like our LAVs cost 1/10 of one of these jets that's flying. The F-35 could field like 3 battalions of Marines just because of
Yep.
One.
That's what my kid's trying to get ready to fly too. I'm like,
Cool.
take care of that.
cheers
right.
to him.
Yeah.
He's defending us.
We'll get there. All right.
Yep.
Number 4, you have to pick one. You tell the gunny you can't find your weapon, or you tell your wife she, in fact, does not look good in that dress.
It's one of the two.
You got to pick one.
I can always soften up the gunny, but I can't tell my wife. I can bribe the gunny with chewing tobacco and coffee,
Yep.
but does not work with my spouse. So I'm going with gunny.
All
Good
right.
Gunny-
choice. Good
Good
choice.
choice, yes. All right. My last question. Which of the 4 of us in the crew gives up first the one waterboarded?
Who gives up first in waterboarding?
Yeah.
I don't know. I tell you, waterboarding is probably the least effective means of interrogating somebody. If I grabbed one of my het gunnies, we had human exploitation team gunnery sergeants downrange, and we had some bad customers, and I'd take them in there for 15 days, and they would come out whimpering and crying. So my money, all of you with my het gunny, because the waterboarding stuff doesn't work as well as the giant dude who used to interrogate my prisoners.
I know it wouldn't be me. I've almost drowned 6 times. It doesn't phase me.
Yeah, crumble under our gunny. I won't even say his name because he was too badass. But there was only one guy that never cracked under this guy. Everyone else cracked.
Oh, I'm sure. I would.
Everyone correct.
Everyone
All right.
cracked.
That's it for me.
All right, guys.
So Rip, how do you take your coffee?
Black.
See, that's a real man.
Sean Parnell.
Was
He
he?
takes his with I don't know.
French vanilla. I
caramel.
think.
It's French vanilla
I don't
latte
know.
or something.
If I
like
had
that.
my choice, It's an Irish coffee. It's got something in it besides just.
There you go. That's how you get up in the morning.
I don't know. I only drink black coffee. I don't drink it.
Same, brother.
All right.
There you go. So, get some is the motto of the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines.
Yes, it is.
You've been selected to come up with a new one. What is it?
You can't replace get some. That's the best. Well, so our old motto used to be consummate professionals. So I go back to the old one for 3-5, consummate professionals. My favorite thing about that call sign was my sergeant major came in once. I shouldn't even repeat this. I'll say it anyways. It's television. My sergeant major came in and he said, "Hey, sir, I got to show you something." I said, "What's up, sergeant major?" He brought in 2 of our young guys and he said, "Put out your arms." And both of them put out their forearms. And it had the old school Vietnam 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines tattooed on their upper arms. And for some ungodly reason, there was this logo that had been going around where someone misspelled consummate professionals and spelled consumante professional. And these 2 guys had tattoos that said consumante professionals tattooed their forearms. And I looked at them, I said, "You guys, officers might not be good for much, but we can sure spell check at least to us before you get the tattoo, man." We're so bummed out. He didn't tell them what was wrong. You're going to go see the battalion commander.
Oh.
And those kids were like, "What?" I said, "Those are misspelled." And they were really sad. But
No
there's
regrets.
been around on the internet that someone made up, I think probably some young guy from a while ago.
Yep.
And it was and it's all over the place. You can't, I've got sweatshirts and coffee mugs with it because it was the big joke when I was back in the battalion.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Beauty.
But the ink is permanent.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I had another guy who got, you remember that movie Gladiator?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
He got the eagle and then SPQR tattooed.
Yeah.
And my staff sergeant brought him in and is like, "Hey, tell the captain what you had." This is when I was a captain. He rolls up his sleeve and he shows it. And I said, what does SPQR stand for? And he goes, "Sir, it's some kind of hard-ass gladiator shit." I said, "What does it stand for?" He goes, "I don't know, sir. It's some kind of badass gladiator thing." I go, "It stands for Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the Roman people. You're not beholden to the Senate, and you're not Roman. What the fuck is wrong with you?" "Oh, shit, sir. Is that what it says?" I'm like, just come over and talk to us before you get the tattoo.
Oh, that's funny, man.
And that reminds me of that movie, The Millers, with Jason Sudeikis, where the kid shows up. It has no
regrets.
No regrets, or
I didn't see the movie.
one letter.
And what is this one?
Oh, this?
Uh-huh.
That's my credo. No regrets.
Mm-hmm. You have no regrets?
Dad?
No? Like not even a single letter?
No way. Not me.
One thing. So, Rip, a soldier, a sailor, an airman get into a fist fight that turns deadly. At the end of it, only one person survives. Who is it and why?
Okay, so it gets deadly and one person survives.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's the soldier who survives. But the Marine has gone home with his girlfriend, so.
Hold my drink while I kiss
Should
your
have
girl.
known. Should have known.
Great answer.
I'm kind of looking out for my other brothers in green with that answer. So.
Oh, that's beauty.
So here's my next question. Which colored crayon is your favorite?
Segue into that one.
He's already getting an ass beating, so you might as well just get it out there.
Next time Rip and I get together,
He's going to kick your ass. I can't
I
wait.
so know it. I deserve it, but go ahead, answer the question.
Here's a good crayon story. So we obviously that
I got a crayon story.
I think that's relatively new that we've started to do that, the crayon thing. But I had a supply officer. His name, well, I won't mention his name, but I think he had really bad troubles. I'll put it that way, downrange. I mean, all of us, after a little while, you're getting a little crazy in the head. The guy wasn't sleeping. He was drinking Rippets. You remember that energy drink nonstop?
Mm-hmm.
And he would kind of just speak nonsense. So when you get up for a briefing, I was the operations officer for a battalion. He was the logistics officer. And he would get up and just kind of gobbledygook would come out of the guy's mouth. And we're all like, "Hey, his name, what's the deal?" And he, "What did I say?" We'd repeat it back to him. He'd say, "Really?" So his guy would start to slip stuff into his briefing, like "purple smells like grapes." other stuff. So it would say, it would be a line report on logistics. It would be like, 22 vehicles did not hydrostatically test positive for, their halon bottles functioning correctly. Purple is my favorite color. And it was like the guy in the movie with the teleprompter.
Right. Yeah.
And purple smells like, and everyone would be like, Jesus, we got to get out of combat because he's lost it. So I don't know. We've been sniffing more than crayons, I guess. I don't know. It's all that gunpowder, I guess.
That's just the funniest thing that the Marines come up with, eating crayons. I think
everybody else did. No Marine voted for that one.
And so my last question: if Eric Bishop was suddenly drafted into the Marine Corps, what would be his MOS?
Hazing might not be allowed with the Marines, but they haze me, Rip, all the time. All the time I get hazed.
I'm old school.
Bandwagon then. I think you'd be a fuel bladder repair specialist.
Oh, geez.
This is the guy, fuel bladders, it has to stitch them up one stitch at a time.
It's very important.
So, Rip, finish this sentence for me. Mark Greaney looks silly when he
doesn't write a Red Metal Part 2.
Good answer.
I think you got away with that
answer.
one. But.
Yeah, baby.
Mike, we'll drink to that, right?
Absolutely, my favorite book.
So you've clearly traveled. You've traveled the world. So what is really the most beautiful, the most breathtaking spot you've seen currently on planet Earth up to this point? Whatever answer. No wrong answer.
We flew back into Maine on one of my Iraq deployments, and the guys were ridden hard and put away wet. They were worn out. We had lost some over downrange, and it was a very, very difficult deployment. And we got off the plane, and you could smell the pine trees. The hatch opened, and there was these American flags all the way down the entryway, and there were moms and dads, not any of our moms and dads, but just parents, older generation, lining the entire corridor, clapping when we came back. And I think everyone went from zero to hero in 3 seconds. We were pretty much down in the dumps. We felt every one of those casualties. And so what's the most beautiful country? I mean, coming home, whatever your home is.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's great. Amazing. Glad you guys had that.
So hopefully before July, but maybe soon, you head out to the bar with the crew. What are you not going to drink? What is it you will not drink at the bar?
Anything non-alcoholic? I mean,
ding, 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 ding.
We can drink to that.
We'll drink to that right now.
Yeah, we'll drink to it with alcohol.
Toast.
Nice.
I did hear through the grapevine that you're a fan of motorcycles. So, what is your dream cycle that you do not have that you would like to drive down that driveway so we can hear the sound again of your alarm going off?
So I did Rolling Thunder a year ago with another Marine buddy of mine.
Nice.
And we heard that was the last one, so we both went out to go do it. I actually own the motorcycle of my dreams. So when I was a kid, all I wanted was a Harley. I just wanted a Dyna Wide Glide, or what was the other one I wanted? It was definitely a Dyna Wide Glide. But I guess because I never had the money for one, I ended up buying a lot of kind of Japanese cruisers. So I started with a Suzuki GS 450X with a kickstart. They didn't have push buttons back then. That was a cruiser. Then I went to a Yamaha 650 Heritage Limited. Then a Kawasaki Vulcan 900. And my latest is the Yamaha Royal Star 1200. It's a 1299, whatever it is. And I've always wanted a Harley until those were the only bikes I could afford were these Japanese cruisers. And I've learned how to tinker on them. I've learned how to work on them, change the oil, just kind of the basic stuff, change the air filter, the usual junk that you need to just kind of keep the bike running.
So my final question is, you've got to shoot an apple off one of our heads. A, whose head you shooting the apple off? And B, what are you going to use to shoot it?
Eric and a bazooka.
I hope it's not a
Okay.
bushmaster.
Eric and a bazooka. You're a bad influence. I don't like you, Chris. Jerk.
So
I can't wait till Hunt kicks your ass. And
I had an I've got an awesome sniper story. One of my sniper team was really, really good when I was a battalion commander. I started Maniscalco, led them. I had a gunnery sergeant, staff sergeant, then he got promoted to gunnery sergeant, who was the team leader. Great lieutenant who had been to Fort Huachuca and was running these guys. And we were in Okinawa, and I don't know, young Marines always want to test the old man and make sure that he doesn't suck. So I would always get challenged on marksmanship. So I came out and I was visiting my snipers out on the range, and they had set up this 1,475 meter course with the M82A1 Barrett 50 cal. And so they said, "Hey, sir, you want to give it a shot?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm happy. I've shot it, a bunch before." They said, "All right, sir," and they're kind of sniggering, "Hey, let's see if the colonel can shoot." So I get behind the rifle, and of course the dope, the windage elevation, we call it dope in the Marine Corps, but the elevation is set for one of the snipers. So when you get behind any rifle, you got to personalize it. But I get behind this rifle, and I've got the Sergeant Maniscalco's spotter with me, and I pull the trigger. They tell me the exact range, and I pull the trigger, and he says, "Sir, high and right." I said, "Okay." So it missed the first shot. I said, "What's the high and right?" He said, "You are up 2 forms, right half a form." I said, "Okay." So I said it again. I took in my deep breath, looked down the barrel, and I went, and I pulled the trigger. And we've got these targets, they're kind of man-sized targets on a very thick wooden board. We use like old pallets, from Altai's gear. And I must have hit dead center on the riser because it split the whole target in half, and it tumbled end over end and then landed in a big heap.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Holy shit! The Battalion Commander fucking destroyed the target. I dropped the rifle. I'm like, "All right, I'm out. That's it."
A legend was born.
The hell I did that. But I'm like, there you go. So it would be a Barrett 50 cal, and I would line all 4 of you up, and I would say, "Give the apple off all 4 of your heads."
Beauty.
There we go.
Nice.
It's 175 meters, which is my longest shot ever. So that was one of my longest.
Damn.
That's awesome.
That's great.
I love the fact that my snipers didn't think I could do it, and I love the fact that whatever luck, I mean, sometimes luck follows drunks and battalion commanders, because we do a lot of dumb shit as a battalion commander that you just, oh God, why did I do that? But every once in a while in front of the troops, you do something fairly decent that doesn't suck, and you're like, thank God I don't look like an idiot.
And somewhere they're telling this story about this same time right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my first question, I'm your last guy. My first question is kind of an easy one. It's a true or false one. When it comes to male authors, true or false, those that are 6'2" and over are much better storytellers.
Absolutely. And they're not only better storytellers, they're handsomer, and girls like them better.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to have to concur.
I don't know. Doesn't seem right.
Okay.
And anyone shorter than about 6 feet just can't write. It's a proven fact.
I thought 5'9" was like the sweet spot. No,
That's for the roller coasters. You get on the roller
That's
coasters.
to ride the Loch Ness Monster down at the
Brutal.
Yeah.
All right, second
No
question.
respect.
You have to change your nickname from Rip. What do you change it to?
One.
My when I was a kid was Pub. So I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to Pub. That's a good one for.
That works for writing.
I like it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Happy Pub
I
Day.
used to punch my sister all the time, and so they called me Puncher, and I couldn't say Puncher. I said Pub, and so for whatever reason, until I was about 6 or 7, I was Pub.
Nice.
Yeah, works.
Having a nickname because you punch your sister is not bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a different twist. We often ask who you want in your foxhole or who your favorite military person is, but if you had to, or if you could do battle and defeat a historical adversary, who would it be?
I might pick someone like Genghis Khan, because if you're talking about like warriors in the flesh, you kind of want to talk about someone like Conan. And I think Genghis is the real life version of someone like Conan. He would grab people and strip their flesh off and eat it. He had no problem, just dismantling a prisoner on his own with his sword or his battle axe or whatever. So I think I'd go toe to toe with that guy and just see, how far we could go. I mean, maybe he was a lot fitter in his heyday than I am, but I'd love to see.
I think if you beat Genghis Khan, you're drinking for free for the rest of your life. So. Okay, so you're a rock drummer, I hear, and part-time rock drummer.
I like to pretend I am. Yes.
Who is the greatest drummer of all time?
So that's a tough question. Lars Ulrich is fantastic. There's a kid who only made it to 23 years old. He was the drummer for Five Finger Death Punch. I didn't really like the band that much, but his name was Jimmy the Rev. His last name I can't remember, but he was called the Reverend. And he had more natural talent, I think, than any other drummer out there. He lived to 23 and then he died of an overdose. I mean, he just lived hard. I think he got his first drum set when he was 6. But if you Google Jimmy the Rev and you want to see someone who has more natural talent than any other drummer alive or dead, that kid had it. And I don't like the band at all. I didn't.
Yeah.
Whatever the damn thing is called, I didn't think it was a very good band, but that kid knew how to play the drums. But I mean, I hate to make a nod towards Rush and our Canadian brothers, but
we don't.
What? What?
I think if you look at Neil Peart, he pronounces it Peart, by the way, like the
yes.
Yeah.
People call him Neil Peart, and it's not. It's Peart, if I'm saying it right. But he's got some amazing talent. I mean, listen to Tom Sawyer once, and you can hear, his drum solos. The guy knows what he's doing.
Rush is the unofficial band of the Crew Reviews, actually.
Yeah.
They're the unofficial band of the Crew Reviews.
I just asked Simon Gervais.
And just about everybody else we've interviewed.
Yeah.
Okay. So my last question, and it still involves drumming. You could drum for any frontman or band in history. Who are you drumming with?
Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl is a drummer, and he's also a singer. So if you go and listen to the Foo Fighters, that guy is nonstop. If you've ever looked at the videos of how he works as a rock musician, he is so dedicated. He's got a really funny movie on YouTube called Fresh Pots. I think he almost had a heart attack because he drank like 6 pots of coffee a day. Damn. That's what I did over in Iraq as an operations officer. So,
yeah.
I mean, I imagine if I was able to turn my energy in my early 30s the way he did to drumming and drink 6 pots of coffee and not have a heart attack, then, I could play for that guy.
Well, you made it through. You made it through the lightning round, which means that life is a gravy train and the wheels are biscuits.
Wheels.
So.
Biscuits and the wheels. Hey, thanks for coming on, Rick. We really appreciate it, man. This was fantastic.
Guys, I've always heard it was. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, anytime you've got your next books coming out, you hit us up and we're there for you. Next time you're ready to promote your next one.
Comes out November 2020.
All right. When we'll see you probably this summer, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Chris is waiting for you.
Congratulations.
Cheers.
Thanks, Rick.
All right. We want to thank Colonel Rawlings for his time and willingness to join us on the Crew Reviews today. Do yourself a favor if you haven't done already and pick up Red Metal, my favorite book of 2019. Keep your eye towards the fall of 2020 when his first book with the Kensington releases, Assault by Fire. On behalf of the crew, thank you, sir, for protecting our country. Semper Fi. Boys, let's toast to a real American hero.
Rip Rawlings.
You're here.
Thank you, Rip.
Thanks, Rip.
Thank you, Rip.
I don't know what I'm getting here, but what I do know is I need more cowbell.
Wait. What did you say, Sean?
I'm ignoring what
you got to repeat that because I didn't hear it.
That was beautiful.
I said she finger paints.
She makes the hand turkey.
Poor girl. So, hey, we got her tire fixed at least.
We'll come out for the wedding.
I half expected you to say that she was going to go, hey, are you on the Crew Reviews?
I know
That's
you.
where you're going with that.
Did you ask her out?
It's a stupid question.
Not yet.
Stupid
All right.
Of course not.
Soon.
I just get to hang out with you 3 boys. That's my life for the next 10 months. Thanks a lot.
Sorry for you.
Yeah, me too. Trust me.
Up in the morning to the rising sun. Up in the morning to the rising sun. Gonna run all day till the running starts. Good night, ladies.
Good night.